I'll start
Yeah.
with you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Matana. Hi. So, when I started this class, as I mentioned before, I didn't believe in global warming because I never learned about it, and people never spoke about it. I never learned about it in school. It wasn't a thing. And then I came here, and I hear all these different opinions, and then I get this topic about fracking, and I'm like, okay, fracking, what is this? So, and then I was actually really interested in this topic, and I was debating the opposition of, against banning fracking, that we should have it. And I wanted to research it because it's an issue that I wouldn't pay attention to unless I lived in areas where it was happening there, and where the effects really feel more real. And having done research on the topic, I feel like the harmful effects of fracking, it was over-exaggerated, but it's still very real. And seeing both sides of the argument, I still believe that fracking shouldn't be banned. And I do believe that using natural gas from fracking, it'll reduce global warming because it significantly reduces CO2. Honestly, CO2, it's 82% of the addition to global warming, which I think is a pretty valid point. And it'll use less water and help the country grow economically. And even solar, which I should have mentioned this while I was speaking about it, but it would be a good alternative, but it depends on the sun and it can't really generate enough energy at night, and so that's why it's not so dependent, which I should have added in. But still, solar might be a good alternative for the future when we properly know how to store the sun's energy. And I learned about a lot of positive and negative effects of fracking through this process, and just something that people actually really do worry about, which I didn't know. And I didn't know about fracking. I also learned about myself and my ability to debate and how to improve my delivery because of the class critiques, which was really helpful. And I learned how to build a debate on having solid and concrete proof and how to present an argument, which this was my first debate, so I really did get to learn that. And I learned what it means to do paired work and build relationships, and saw a lot of great points about the government side and the research that I did. But keeping fracking in practice, it's necessary, and regulations should maybe try to reduce the harmful effects it can have, at least until solar becomes popular and developed enough to take over.
Thanks for staying to listen. So at the beginning of this quarter, I was given the challenge of arguing the government position of the claim that hurricanes and other extreme climate events are imminent consequences of global warming. Before I completed my research, my personal belief towards this claim was actually in favor of the opposition, even though I had to argue for the government side. We had just completed watching An Inconvenient Truth and examining different critiques of the film and Al Gore's claims of the connection between global warming and extreme climate events. So I knew there was kind of a big burden that we had to meet in order to convince the rest of the class that the government side was correct. But now, having gone through the process of researching and debating for the government side, I can conclude that I now actually agree with the government side, even though we lost. But I believe I should have used a different strategy in arguing our case, and I will go over that strategy with you now. So admittedly, the causal link between certain extreme weather events and climate change are weak, like for example with hurricanes and other extreme weather events like tornadoes. The historical data records needed for scientists to accurately draw the connection between the two, it's just simply not there. So I cannot conclude that these extreme weather events are caused by global warming. However, while I completed my own research, I found that even though not all extreme weather events are directly caused by global warming, some of them, like extreme temperature events and extreme precipitation events, are scientifically proven to be. I found the evidence that supported these claims to be extremely credible and convincing, coming from the American Meteorological Society and the other meta-analysis of 22 separate studies that spanned 91 researchers, all from very credible universities. What I should have done to argue my case was follow a strategy similar to what Michael did in his fact debate. I should have focused on the fact that some extreme weather events are caused by climate change, while repeatedly emphasizing how this met our burden of proof, because we were by no means responsible for proving that all extreme climate climate events are caused by global warming. Had I followed this strategy, I think our side would have had a better time convincing our audience of our claim. In sum, my belief on the topic of extreme climate events, that there are imminent consequences of global warming, changed from that of the opposition to the government from this process. I believe that the strength of the evidence that shows that extreme temperature events and extreme precipitation events are consequences of global warming are concrete examples that go in favor for our side. These examples fulfilled our burden of proof because we did not have to prove that all climate events are consequences of global warming. I concluded that this should have been my major emphasis in my case, instead of my original strategy that I used trying to gather as much evidence as possible. To tie this realization back to the class as a whole, I noticed this was a larger trend for a lot of the government positions arguing for fact debates, but by the end of the quarter, and especially after Michael's team won, I realized that the government sides were starting to realize the importance of emphasizing what their burden of proof was and why they met it. Thank you.
Right on the dot.
Hello everyone, my name is Alina. Before taking this class, I very much considered myself to be a strong believer in climate change, and actually an advocate of climate change prevention. However, after viewing all of our debates, reading many articles, and watching 2 documentaries, I learned many things, and the way that I think about climate change has shifted slightly as a result. So to briefly refresh your memory, I would like to remind you that I debated on the side of the opposition with Louis for the first policy debate. Our team argued that reducing CO2 emissions was not a good policy for reducing global warming threats. So this was a little strange for me to advocate this because I didn't actually believe that, I actually believe that CO2 contributes to global warming and should in fact be reduced. So when I got this topic, I actually kind of knew that I wanted to focus on methane as part of our counter policy. This is because I'm actually vegan, and I have been vegan for the past decade or 10 years, but decade sounds a lot more impressive, so I'm going to go with that. And as a vegan, it's almost a prerequisite that you watch a lot of documentaries that tell you how much the animal agriculture industry is contributing to climate change. And of course, cows are mass-produced within the industries, cows create methane, and methane gas contributes to climate change. Bam, that's what I knew. However, as Louis and I began to investigate further, I began to realize that evidence supporting methane wasn't as strong as I anticipated. Don't get me wrong, it was still good, but it wasn't as clear as I'd hoped because although methane is 20 times more effective at trapping heat than CO2, it only makes up a small portion of greenhouse gas emissions compared to CO2.
One.
However, from this research, I found that the animal agriculture industry was a leading source of CO2, methane, and nitrous oxide, which are the top 3 greenhouse gases that contribute to climate change. I also want to mention that this industry is responsible for most deforestation and water pollution as well. So after researching and presenting my debate, I've come to the conclusion that the best policy for preventing global warming is to reform this animal agriculture industry, since they emit the top 3 leading greenhouse gases. Looking beyond climate change, reforming the industry would also help the environment as well. At the end of this whole experience, I consider myself to still be a believer in climate change. However, I'm a lot more skeptical of the assertions made supporting climate change, because in the past I found myself only questioning statements that were made against the presence of climate change, but now I'm critical of both. So, thank you.
Is that okay?
Yeah, did everyone
I
get
gotta
a...
stay on time.
Yeah, you don't have to stay extra time.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
People earlier told me.
Yeah, we still got... Did everyone get in there? Yeah, so we've got you and Arthur have to do the group.
The what?
Yeah, they were just doing the oral report from
Smaller?
Did you did the oral report, right?
Yes.
So we just
Get through their critical thinking thing in the whole section.
yeah.
It's like 5 minutes times 30 people.
And then I don't
each.
have to like roll my paper. I can like a little bit more.
Yeah, what's it? 2:30?
Yeah.
How many people they've just been going through like their critical thing or?
So Professor Miller is not here, but we're filming it. I'm doing some grading, but he's also going to watch them and grade them.
Okay.
And so, yeah, you guys can just do, we'll do John first, then Arthur, just from the alphabetical order.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
Cool.
We could,
So 5 minutes to max.
thanks for staying the time. Can you stand behind that?
Behind it?
No, actually, you're good. You're good.
I can stand up. I don't like how this Alright, 2, 1. Alright, hello everyone. Well, I'm going to be going over some few things relating to critical thinking and a couple other things that really relate to the arguments of the class as a whole and what we've been learning. So I'm going to be going over the BS detector, how I feel that has been kind of some dynamic changes in critical thinking, and a couple of other some examples that we can touch on and really make clear for what we've been doing in this class. Okay, so one thing I noticed and learned with critical thinking is that there are a lot of choices that are involved in that, and that relates directly to argumentation. Because when we have, when we are arguing, we have choices that come in many forms. We have the choice of how we can organize. We also have evidential points, and most specifically, we can also choose the exact composition of our support, whether that's striking a balance between evidence, credibility, and shared social values of the audience. And there are just so many ways to approach how to persuade an audience. I find that critical thinking is imperative to have in that process. And we can even also understand maybe a more informal aspect. When we were in the class debating, we all kind of had to make the decision each and every time about what we would do. And that kind of allowed us to get better to understand how our decision process is and what really allows us to see, okay, this is what's going to get me to decide with this side versus the other. And I would also say that, from sort of more, kind of real life examples I found, talking about specifically in one of the journals, I had noticed that when you question people's evidence on purpose, it really gets them to kind of both you and the other person question it. And I think with numerical statistical data, I think there's just kind of default flow we get into when we hear it. We just kind of accept it and absorb it. I don't think that's something that we want. I really think we should be able to just kind of question that, and that's something I definitely learned from the journal experiences. And I've also seen a lot of unstated assumptions kind of tie into that when you're not paying attention. Those can really kind of sneak your way. But once you're critically engaged, those hidden assumptions as well as these numerical figures really start to stand out. Also want to point out with the Milgram Experiment, it's pretty insane how the authorities can be quite, get us to the same kind of belief. And I noticed that when I was particularly occupied with something, if someone would just say something, I'd be less likely to challenge it. And I think that being able to adequately, question authority will be able to strengthen ourselves as independent thinkers. I think that's very important, especially with a lot of things going on in the news. And it's definitely regressive for your mental growth if you just kind of go into that pattern and habit of taking someone's word as given. And I want to move on now to BS detector. So from the debates, I felt that my BS detector has allowed me to kind of look at scientific evidence with a little bit more distinction and kind of really point out causality. I think causality is the most key important thing that scientific arguments rely off of. And it can be a little bit tricky, absolutely. And I think in the future we definitely need to expand the use of the BS detector. It's something that we need to continuously use because that allows us to grow and really be more familiar in other subjects and to learn from ourselves. And finally, I want to touch on Passmore's on teaching to be critical. So I found some very cool insights in that section there. I really liked how he said, you can teach kids multiplication tables, irregular verbs, and all those kinds of things, but teaching them to appreciate a poem or suggest an exception in a routine, that can be a little bit different. And I feel like, as someone that's been in that K through 12 program of that, we preach critical thinking, I don't think they've actually done a good job at it. And I love this point when he says that teachers promote deferential habits and that are utterly committed to certain beliefs. These are the ones that try to maintain the class hegemony, whether that's silence, adhering to a syllabus. These things kind of constrain the critical thinking of a classroom. I would much rather have some students kind of veer off and talk and ask, well, why is this procedure so, rather than say, no, sorry, we got to keep going and drudging through the material. And that's why I like the idea of being critical. I like this term critical creative because we oftentimes need to look at other elements when we're making arguments and kind of really being able to ask why things are instead of just taking them as given. So overall, I think that critical thinking has been an imperative part in argumentation here and through journalism and real life examples. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Since the last class in quarter of spring 2017, I think it's necessary to do the recap of all the highlights of the class that we have touched upon. And my final speech would emphasize on the critical thinking aspect rather than the evidence that I was bringing up in my briefing and my speech. So in order for that to happen, I would like to ask a question: what was the main objective of this class, and what was the main concept that really guided us through this course? So according to the syllabus, which we were issued at the beginning of the course, being able to share feelings, speaking honestly, hearing others speak honestly, and getting constructive feedback or criticism. Now this set of skills and abilities was necessary in order to succeed in this class. And besides that, there was another set of skills which was actually developed upon during the class itself, thinking critically. In the beginning, we have stipulated that thinking critically means to conduct an objective analysis and evaluation of an issue in order to form a judgment. And this is exactly what I have improved as a result of this class. Now, in the syllabus, there are 13 main objectives of this course, and number 13 is being aware of the basic principles of inductive and deductive logic. I was always obsessed with logic, and I was always trying to make my argument valid from the logical point of view. That's why I have noticed that there were lots of fallacies, lots of assumptions in the climate change argument overall. As I was saying in my global report in the previous speech, I was saying that I didn't have a solid point on climate change. However, I was a little bit skeptical towards the climate change being primarily caused by human activity, because I was witnessing all this chaos on the media when the people that were disagreeing with the consensus were labeled as deniers, and there was this very awkward and very disillusional parallel to Holocaust deniers, calling people deniers of climate change. And the main two fallacies that I've witnessed in this climate change debate was really absence of evidence fallacy and ad hominem, which is personal attack. I would like to focus on ad hominem at first and then proceed to absence of evidence, because those are the two main lessons that I've learned from this class in particular. Now, ad hominem means you are attacking individual's personality instead of attacking his argument. This is really the case with many of arguments in the climate change sphere. When people are disagreeing with the consensus side, they are labeled as deniers, I was mentioning before, and their argument is not really heard. Nobody gets to the substance of their evidence, to numbers, and to the logical chain of their claim. Instead, they proceed to attacking a person's personality, as I was saying before, and this is something that is very dangerous, not only for the climate change debate in general, but also for many other fields of debate which we are witnessing in today's world. It really obstructs the path to critical thinking and being able to conduct this objective analysis of facts that I've mentioned in my introduction. The second lesson that I've learned, which was crucial for me, is absence of evidence. As you remember, I was debating on the opposition side against an assertion that human activity is a primarily responsible factor for global warming. We won the debate, and I think we presented more high quality evidence. But upon leaving this class, I don't have this opinion that my point of view cannot change, because absence of evidence is not equals to falsehood. So whenever we are not having sufficient evidence to assert something, it doesn't mean that in the future we're not going to have other sources or other ways to prove that this claim is actually true. So I'm still open to other points. I'm still open to listening to perspectives of other people in terms of global warming being caused by human activity. But as of this moment, I clearly think that there is insufficient evidence to draw a causal link between CO2 emissions, which are considered to be the primary part of the human activity causing global warming. Now, in summary, I've shown you the main objectives of this class, which we have completed, and necessary prerequisites, which were stated on the syllabus. And I want to say that those objectives and an ability to spot those two fallacies was something that I appreciated the most in this course. And going to the BS detector, I would like to show how I dealt with it. I completely eliminated the TV news and completely eliminated my access to outlets that have strong political leniency. Instead, I subscribed to print versions of Wall Street Journal and The Economist and The Guardian. I mean, I don't have time, but I would love to go in more detail with my sources. Thank you.
All right.